In Invincible Season 2, Episode 4, we saw as Omni-Man was taken away to a Viltrumite prison after losing in a battle against Lucian after they found his new world. However, one of the last things he says to Mark is, "Read my books, Mark." So what exactly is he talking about? Well, a little later in the story, we see Mark going to visit one of his dad's friends as he asks him about the words his father said, and it's here where Mark is given a secret collection of books from back when Nolan wanted to be a science fiction author instead of writing the traveling books he eventually became known for in the authoring world. In the comics, we actually get a full page of text from these books paired with an image, like this image here, which is paired with an excerpt about an alien who has a mysterious blaster that no one in the universe has been able to locate the source of. However, it's known that Space Rider's blaster is capable of shooting through anything, as this user became a legend across 12 galaxies, leading to Nolan hunting him down to confirm whether or not he was real. There's another book about Nolan being sent to a planet to survey its danger level to the Empire and finding a race of aliens that nearly tore him apart because of how powerful and fast they are. It's here where Mark realizes that these aren't fiction books, they're books on all the Viltrumites' weaknesses, and a new mystery begins. We saw as Alan the alien visited the coalition of planets to go and talk to their leader and tell them that on Earth there actually is one good Viltrumite, before Alan is ripped apart by 3 bad Viltrumites and placed in a healing chamber. Now eventually, when Alan wakes up from his coma, now stronger than ever, with Thaedus telling Alan that their tests tell them that he's very near, if not at the same level of an adult Viltrumite right now, and with training he could even become stronger than them. Alan sits there confused, wondering how they could have possibly gotten that information since they've never had a Viltrumite to test on, and this is where Thaedus theatrically rips off his fake beard, leaving only his trademark Viltrumite mustache on his face, as he reveals to Alan that he himself was one all along. Thaedus explains that he hid the truth from the coalition and Alan because he thought that he was an anomaly among his people and knew it would cost him their trust. However, Thaedus gives Alan the mission of returning to go to Earth and get Mark Grayson and bring him to the coalition so the plot can finally start moving at a rapid pace. After Alan the alien leaves Earth so he could tell the coalition the information inside of Omni-Man's books, he's thinking about his girlfriend as suddenly he's nearly hit by a passing Viltrumite warship in space and prays that they didn't see him. When they stop, he quickly finds out that they did, and who comes out of the ship but the Viltrumite that everybody hates, Anissa. Alan tells her that they should just talk it over, but after a conversation with Mark, she says, "Sorry, I tried that already today, not gonna happen." We see Anissa trying to hit Alan with a punch, but he easily dodges it and sends her flying with a punch of his own, saying, "Your loss." Anissa is really rocked by this punch, so much so that she looks shocked that she wonders how a Unopan could possibly be so strong. But as Alan keeps his secret, she reveals one of hers by saying that he might even survive inside the Viltrumite prison long enough to be executed by a Viltrumite warrior, as is custom for their people. At the mention of this prison, Alan pretty much lets Anissa win the battle as he realizes it's a perfect opportunity to find where they have Omni-Man, as he's arrested and taken away, and Anissa gets to feel a little better about herself. However, sometime down the line, we see as Omni-Man tries to break free from the Viltrumite prison all by himself and starts destroying the suits of armor that are holding him there, when General Craig arrives himself to put Nolan down, saying that soon enough he'll be executed for his crimes against Viltrum. Here, Nolan is carried away by a guard who says he grew up hearing stories of Nolan's adventures, when at that moment, Omni-Man sees a spark of hope as Alan the alien gets brought in and a new partnership begins. And interestingly enough, their cells end up being right next to each other, so Alan is able to use his telepathy to communicate with Omni-Man through his mind to tell him all sorts of things about Mark and Thaedus' orders to get him so they could eventually take down the Viltrum Empire. But Nolan isn't very happy when that topic comes up. Eventually, they start sharing even deeper thoughts, like Alan telling Nolan about his wife, while Nolan shares stories about Debbie, and the two realize they've actually known each other for a long time, considering the countless battles they've had in Earth's orbit over the years. So it's no surprise that very quickly, these two become friends. Eventually, the aliens give up on trying to execute Alan and left him to be executed by the same Viltrumite sent to cut down Omni-Man as well. However, on this day, Nolan would tell Alan that it's time as they break free from their shackles and a prison escape begins. The minute that Omni-Man gives Alan the signal, the alien breaks free from his handcuffs and literally flies straight through the wing of cells, tearing them open with his arms, as it starts to look really ridiculous how the Viltrumites ever thought that they could hold Alan there in his new buff form. From here, the plan is set in motion, with step 1 being to cause a bunch of damage that raises all of the alarms, so they can move into step 2 where the prisoners are all freed, allowing them to cause even more commotion. From here, Alan takes a moment for step 3, which is to look through the prisoners quickly to see if there's anyone useful they can use in the escape, and as Alan looks, he hears a shout saying, "Who is brave enough to free Battle Beast?" as we add another monster to the team. Battle Beast tells Alan that he'll only follow him as long as their goals align. However, he's really only helping him because doing so will create conflict as he dives into the guards and starts tearing through them. Elsewhere, we see as Omni-Man's execution is being carried out, which involves 2 Viltrumites walking in a circle around him, beating him to death. But at that moment, Alan and Battle Beast break through the roof as the Beast realizes that these are the Viltrumites he's been searching his entire life for, and together they save Nolan from his attackers, leading to the 3 of them starting a prison riot which fell into pandemonium. First off, while Alan, Battle Beast, and Nolan battled all of the strongest guards in Viltrumite station on the prison, we see every single freed prisoner take the escape pods and all the ships stored there so that they can get away. But Alan realizes that while Battle Beast is helping him, he he's really only focusing on one of the Viltrumites and keeping him busy because he found a worthy opponent. So Nolan and Alan do most of the work. Alan realizes that he can give them an opening, so he punches a massive hole into the side of the prison's outer walls and sends everyone out into space, leaving only the enemy Viltrumite agents and our 3 escaped prisoners alive, as Alan gets viciously attacked by a nameless Viltrumite who probably should have just ran away, because what comes next is a double-sided attack from both Nolan and Alan together, who both punch him on both sides of his head, completely shattering it apart and making it implode. As Omni-Man goes, "Wow, how strong are you?" and Alan replies, "Very." But before Nolan reveals a huge secret to the Unopen, we cut away and see Battle Beast thinking, "More, more, more," as he tears apart the Viltrumite he was fighting, and our boys are officially free. Alan tells Nolan that they need to get to Mark right away because he needs to get him to the coalition of planets, and he's sure that what they just did alerted every Viltrumite in the galaxy, so they need to escape right now before the full might of the Empire is on their head. Omni-Man tells Alan that they have nothing to worry about and that no one is coming for them, but this throws Alan off, asking what Omni-Man knows that he doesn't. This is where Nolan reveals one of the biggest secrets in the series that the Viltrumites have been keeping from the rest of the universe, as he tells Alan that the only 2 Viltrumites in their sector of the universe are the ones that they had to send by Viltrumite law to commit his execution. But in truth, there are only 50 Viltrumites left in the entire universe, and that number gets smaller anytime they have battles like these. But because there's so few and because they're so spread out, Omni-Man tells Alan that this is the reason that they'll be able to defeat the Empire if they work together, so he tells Alan to take him to the coalition of planets instead of Mark, and he'll not only tell them everything he knows about Viltrum, but when it comes time to go to war against the Viltrumites, he'll not only stand with them, he'll lead the charge and show them exactly whose head it is that they need to remove. And Alan the alien and Omni-Man begin a brand new friendship, and we see the very beginning of Invincible's Avengers starting to form. He goes with Alan to the headquarters of the coalition of planets as he meets the leader of the coalition named Thaedus, who has a mixed reaction to the news that there's only 50 Viltrumites left in the universe. Thaedus tells Omni-Man that he's also a Viltrumite, which Nolan doesn't believe, as he challenges him to rip his beard off, which seems to be a custom among undercover Viltrumite agents, but Thaedus tells him that Alan can vouch for him since he really doesn't want to rip his beard out again because it does still hurt. Nolan is almost relieved to learn this since he thought something was genetically wrong with him since he never heard of another Viltrumite betraying their people. But Thaedus says that his story was hidden from time because his crime is something that no other Viltrumite should ever know of. During this meeting, Alan, Thaedus, and Nolan start to discuss how they're going to bring the Empire to its end, and they realize that they're going to need weapons and other specific things that Nolan has come across that he knows can hurt Viltrumites. But more importantly, they're going to need a team. From this moment on, Nolan and Alan are given 1 hour to raid the secret armory for whatever they need, as they're given a secret mission to assemble a team to go to war against the Viltrumites, as Omni-Man knows exactly who he wants to recruit first. And as Alan and Omni-Man land on Earth, Alan asks Nolan if he wants to stop by his house so that he can apologize to Debbie, but Nolan says that he just wants to get off of Earth as quick as he can because there are too many bad memories for him there right now. As the two land looking for a boy named Zach Thompson, they're told that Zach is actually out in space in his space station along with his dad, and the two are glad they were able to track him down. As Zach sits in space with his dad, an alert comes up on the screen as they think that they're being attacked, but when he looks out the window, he sees Alan waving at him with Nolan floating in the back, because since they're able to survive in space, if they wanted to hurt Tech Jacket, they could have destroyed the space station instead of knocking. Zach agrees to join the team and tells Alan that he's more of a planetary protector than a superhero, since he doesn't get involved in the fights that happen on Earth typically, and he focuses on going to school and watching out for space-based threats, which is exactly why he's agreeing to help them, since it sounds like Viltrumites are the ultimate space-based threat. And with that, our team now has 3 members, but from this point on, it's time to gather one of Omni-Man's greatest enemies to see if he'll break bread and join the side of good. But Nolan actually has to make a stop on their journey to pick up more powerful allies, as he and Alan search for a specific android that Nolan claims should hold the strongest weapon in the universe. When they find it, Alan wonders why Nolan hasn't just picked it up if he left it here all this time, and Omni-Man responds saying that it's bonded with its user, so if he touched it, it would have gone back to the space racer, the man who owns it, and gave him an opportunity to get away, but since he's dead now, it's finally safe to take it. However, quickly they discover that all this time Space Racer was actually alive and just waiting for the day where his weapon would fly back into his hand. He blasts the weapon at Alan and Omni-Man, setting off a chain reaction in the asteroids that they need to save him from, but as he summons his space bike and prepares to fire on them one more time, Alan has to come clean to save the both of them, as he tells Space Racer that Nolan is reformed and is gathering a team to battle against the Viltrumites. From here, Space Racer follows them back to the coalition of planets, and while he's still unsure about Nolan, he can't miss out on the opportunity to take out the Viltrumites once and for all. As Omni-Man prepares his own Avengers team to go against the Viltrumites in the Viltrumite War, he also goes around collecting a bunch of Viltrumite weaknesses, and one of the ones that he's actually scared to go and grab is a group of the Ragnar aliens that we've described already on this channel. Nolan tells Alan that none of the Viltrumites could figure out how to deal with these aliens until eventually he came up with the idea to use a massive solar disk to block out their sun and freeze their entire planet. Things go wrong when the crew of his ship destroys the solar disk instead of moving it, causing all the ice in the planet to start melting within minutes, as Nolan begins to freak out trying to carry away Frolan Ragnars to the ship. But when the one he's carrying bursts out of the ice like the Avatar, he's stuck in to battle against it as more and more of them start to crawl out from the planet's surface, with Nolan telling Alan to run since at least he has some experience fighting these things, but Alan thinks that he's got it since he's gotten so strong. Nolan yells no because the Ragnars literally eat Viltrumites alive and they're still half awake from being frozen, so as the two escape the planet as fast as they can, it makes sense that Nolan refuses to get on the ship out of anger since this cost him a really valuable resource in the upcoming battle. So he actually goes across the universe after having a meeting of Thaedus and Alan, where he decides to collect every single Viltrumite weakness that he's come across over the years. He starts by traveling to a bug planet which he explains was originally a world where the Claxus plant grew, and it's poisonous to Viltrumites, so they flooded the planet with a special kind of beetle that multiply and eat faster than the plant can grow. After this, he visits planet Geldari to ask about their legendary hero Tech Jacket and learn of his location, before heading out into space in search of space sharks and eventually end up on Battle Beast's planet where they ask about his whereabouts, but apparently he's more like a legend on his planet since no one alive has ever seen him before. Finally though, at the end of this journey, Omni-Man ends up on a planet looking for another beast that was actually strong enough to hurt the Viltrumites, but he says that here he actually did his job too well because the entire planet is a wasteland and nothing remains, reminding us of the horrible things Nolan has done. We pick up at a top secret remote outpost for the US government where the oldest Viltrumite conquest is being stored. The last we saw him, he looked so bad that my video actually got age restricted. However, slowly over time he's actually healed all of the damage that he's taken from his battle with Mark, and now after quite some time he's finally woken up. As soon as the sensors pick up Conquest brain activity, alarms start to blare as the Viltrumite comes flying out of that prison that Cecil was oh so sure would keep him soundly in their custody. As he flies into the sky, he screams at the top of his lungs and eventually ends up in space, where he looks down at Earth with a smile on his face. Instead of heading back for round 2 against Mark right now, he goes back to the king of the Viltrumites to report on his time there and call for their forces to invade Earth. However, General Krieg screams at him to bow on his knees, which puts fear in his heart, as Grand Regent Thragg comes out and tells Conquest that he's been pretty useless, but he'll give him one more chance to serve them without fail, as he sends Conquest out to intercept Omni-Man and Alan on their way to Earth. Omni-Man and Alan travel to Earth to pick up the final member of their team, the Protector of Earth, Invincible. As Mark prepares to leave Earth once again and fight some powerful threat, he and Adam Eve recap all of the major events of the story so far, as this is a massive turning point in the story where everything is about to change. And after saying their goodbyes since Eve isn't part of the team, Mark thinks about his Viltrumite blood and tells her that he's scared of what this war will make him become when everything is said and done, as he flies out and joins his father with Oliver at his side, as the 3 Viltrumite Graysons are reunited now on the same team, and their spaceship starts to fly away towards the upcoming battle. However, before they get far, they're interrupted when the entire ship explodes as if something went flying right through it, as Mark goes to investigate and can't believe his eyes when he sees in front of him Lucan, General Krieg, and his strongest enemy yet, Conquest, who still has Mark's mind filled of trauma, as Conquest smiles of a brand new hand ready to continue their battle, and Mark thinks how? Please no, not him, as with a smile on his face, Conquest tells Mark how good it is to see him again and how things are much simpler this time because his orders are just one word: slaughter. As Mark stares him down with a face full of rage, he continues on to say that he's happy to get another shot at Mark since he underestimated him last time, but he's sad that Mark left the girl at home since he should have brought along some help to make things more interesting, considering Conquest is joined by 2 of his friends as well. As Conquest makes one final comment about how he's excited to break Oliver's arm again in front of Mark before finishing him off last, Oliver has enough and lets his emotions get the better of him, flying towards the Viltrumite beast as Lucan intercepts Mark, and we see an all-out battle begin, with Tech Jacket asking if the Viltrumites have any weak spots because this fight is coming out of nowhere and he still hasn't even been briefed on how to battle against them. But off in the distance, we see Omni-Man finally stumbling upon what's happening here as he sees Conquest hit his son and tackles him away, but as Nolan tackles him to get him off of his son Oliver, Conquest grabs Nolan by the head and screams, "Nolan the traitor! I can't believe I get to kill you too. Your son is so powerful, almost stronger than you. You must be so proud." As Conquest bashes his head into Nolan's nose, it's easy to tell that these two have history, but before it can be explored much, we see Mark taking Conquest to the side and being warned to be careful from his father, but he replies that he's fought this guy before, so he's got this, as he starts to bash Conquest's face in and question him on how he survived, but the Mad Titan swats him away, telling him that he woke up in a metal box below the surface of their planet, as Mark realizes that it must have been Cecil's doing and thinks about what he's gonna do when he sees him again. At that moment, a Viltrumite warship arrives and their battle droid-like alien helpers start to spill out into space. However, while Mark is dealing with Conquest, the oldest Viltrumite spots Oliver flying down to the nearest planet because he's running out of air, as Conquest begins to rush down after Oliver, and Mark follows at full speed. We see Mark tackling him out of space down onto the planet and creating a massive explosion on the surface of this world that hits like a nuke. Mark lands holding Conquest by the throat with both of his hands, saying that either that last attack knocked the wind out of him or the beast used his last breath to go as fast as he could, thinking he'd be able to breathe when he landed on Oliver. But now this is over because Mark says he'll never let him breathe again. Conquest starts to fly and slam Mark into rocks as he thinks that he already got a breath before Mark was able to start choking him, but even still, the boy just just won't let go. Oliver looks up and sees the two of them crashing back down towards the planet as Omni-Man heads down towards the battle to help, and we see Conquest still thrashing around before punching Mark right in the ribs and definitely shattering a bunch of them as he continues to pound down on Invincible, but still, Mark doesn't let go. Getting desperate, Conquest uses his finishing move and pierces his whole arm right through Mark's stomach, and while he's being choked up by a desperate Mark, he takes his big metal hand and shoves it into Mark's stomach again, beginning to rip out Mark's intestines as Mark starts to scream in pain, yelling "No! No!" as his eyes begin to roll to the back of his head and his insides start to spill out all over Conquest. As Omni-Man arrives on the planet, he spots their battlefield, and eventually with Oliver, he stumbles upon Mark gasping for air and begging for help, as beside him we see Conquest laying there dead completely blue, still holding Mark's guts crushed in his hand. From here, a little time goes by and we see Omni-Man burying Conquest, telling Oliver that despite the fact that he lost his way, at one point Conquest was the greatest of all of Viltrum's warriors and still deserves some respect. Oliver thinks that Conquest deserved to rot in the sun, but Nolan thinks that on some level the giant was a greater man than him because everything he did was in service to Viltrum. From here, the two of them head back to Mark, who they've bandaged up, and it's time for these two to get to know each other. As time goes by and we see Nolan hunting down some of the massive centipede-like inhabitants of the planet because they haven't eaten this entire time. Oliver says he'll never eat that because it looks disgusting, but when Nolan throws him a piece, we see that before long, the two of them are munching down on this bug meat, as Oliver even asks Omni-Man if there's any extra, causing him to smile. As more time goes by, we see Oliver draining the intestines of one of these creatures into Mark's mouth to keep him hydrated, as it's been almost a month. Oliver asks Nolan if he actually loves Debbie, and Nolan says that it took him rotting in Viltrumite prison to realize it, but he actually does. But this wouldn't have been possible without his time on Earth, because Viltrumites don't genuinely care about each other like humans do, and that by itself changed him. Oliver admits that sometimes he thinks about his mom and the generations of Thraxans that have lived since he's left and gets sad, but he wants to take down the Viltrumites because they see him as inferior, as he finds even more bugs to snack on, and this father-son bonding experience continues. And off on planet Telescria, we see Thaedus screaming to the captain of their ship, asking how the captain could lose track of Mark, Omni-Man, and Oliver, given they're the most important people in their entire attack force. Thaedus apologizes for screaming as the captain leaves with his head low, and we cut away to a Viltrumite ship where they try to pinpoint Mark's location, but they're having trouble since their sensors are telling them that Conquest killed 3 life forms on the small planet near them, thanks to Tech Jacket and Alan actually being attached to the outside of the spaceship using Tech Jacket's suit, which he also uses to hack into the ship and keep Mark safe. It's here we're searching through the wreckage, a team of aliens picks up something frozen and loads it into their ship, not realizing that what they've found is an enraged battle beast ready to go as soon as he thaws, as once again all of the pieces we've been discussing for so long line up in preparation for war, but the time for preparation is over. As back on planet Telescria, Thaedus orders the first attack on a Viltrumite outpost, and the Viltrumite War officially begins. We see Tech Jacket celebrating being able to grow a beard as the entire Viltrumite ship they're attached to shakes, letting Alan know that his tracking chip has been working this entire time, and the cavalry is finally here to attack the Viltrumites. Looking out into space, we see an army of battlesuit-wearing aliens armed with poison blasters developed from the Beetles that Omni-Man retrieved earlier in the story. We see after the battle that Thaedus reports the Viltrumites they ambushed have fortified a base on the planet Ula, so that'll be the next place he sends them as they push the Viltrumites deeper and deeper into their own territory and continue to gain ground on them. As Mark continues to heal, we see that Alan and Tech Jacket get very busy attacking Viltrumite outposts, giving a second attempt at capturing the Ragnars after Alan and Nolan failed, and all the while, Thaedus keeps informing them of different updates like how they created a tether system to capture the Ragnars, how Battle Beast is going to be heading to a planet named Quintessa in search of Viltrumites, and how despite how well the war is going, they don't stand a chance when the Viltrumites come together without Nolan and the others. As Mark continues to heal from his injuries caused by his battle against Conquest, Oliver chows down on some alien bug meat, with Nolan joking that he's not even waiting until he's hungry to eat those things anymore. As time continues to go by, we see him and Nolan laughing as Oliver tells him stories of what it was like growing up with Mark on Earth, like how he can't sleep when Mark has Eve over and how embarrassing it is to constantly hear them going at it, as Omni-Man remembers keeping Mark awake exactly the same way and knows that's his son. One of these days, we see Oliver lifting a massive boulder and doing squats as he says he can't do it, and Nolan encourages him, saying, "Look at me. Look how much stronger you've gotten over the last month. You've got this, Oliver. You can do it." It's really nice seeing these two bonding, and again, these chapters are some of the best for Oliver's character building we've gotten so far, but eventually, while checking on Mark, Nolan says that Mark's spine is finally healed, so now his healing should speed up quite a bit since he isn't rebuilding bone anymore. And in a month, he expects Mark to be awake again, putting a countdown on the return of Invincible, and as we pick up with him laying on the ground for the first time in months in his coma, he says the words "kill you" out loud, causing Oliver to take notice as Omni-Man says, "Good, it won't won't be long now. On the planet Telescria, we see two of Thaedus' information aliens doing their job and reporting on the war efforts, like how Battle Beast managed to defeat all the Viltrumites on Quintessa. However, on the side, we see Grand Regent Thragg sending a message to one of these two, who's actually a traitor, telling him that they're still losing this war, which is unacceptable, so he wants the alien to drop the shields and the defenses on his command so they can attack the homeworld and be done with this entire battle. And of course, this alien agrees. Eventually, as Thaedus speaks of several world leaders for different alien races, the Viltrumites finally arrive as Anissa starts flying through buildings and their warships scatter their forces all over the planet. Finally though, as all of this is going on, Nolan and Oliver return to find that Mark is woken up, asking them who defeated Conquest as they tell him that it was him in press. And now that Mark is awake, he has a different look of a beard and a mustache coming in over the last month, as it's time for him to rejoin the war. We pick up on planet Telescria and see Grand Regent Thragg talking to Argal Skull, telling him that Thaedus has been a major thorn in their side. After ruling the universe for thousands of years, only him and the Coalition have been able to destabilize that, and it all started with his original betrayal of the Viltrum Empire. Thaedus lifts the rubble off of himself, showing his insane muscles, as he grabs one of his alien assistants, accusing him of being the traitor, before General Krieg slams onto him from the sky after finally finding his prey. Thaedus makes him work for the victory as he punches him across the face and tries to fly away real quick to squash that traitor, but Krieg doesn't let him get away, saying, "You've got your own problems." At that moment, we see Alan and Tech Jacket arrive as Tech Jacket hits Krieg with a laser beam, as Tech Jacket proceeds to carry Thaedus away from the danger, but ends up getting grabbed by Anissa as the all-out battle just continues to get worse and worse, causing Thaedus to say it's over. He never expected them to attack them directly. They're doomed. But at that moment, Tech Jacket says, "No, wait, look!" And we see Omni-Man, Oliver, and Mark finally rejoining the war as it's time to face the Viltrumites directly. They arrive on Telescria during the Viltrumite onslaught of the planet, and as Anissa is about to slam Tech Jacket and Thaedus' heads together, we see Nolan coming in and clocking her across the face, sending her flying, as Mark and Oliver start to disable all of the enslaved Viltrumite battlesuit-wearing henchmen, with Mark telling Oliver to try and be mindful of their situation. From here, Mark tells Oliver to follow him, fly as fast as he can, and keep his fist up in front of him, as Oliver does what he says and wonders just what they're about to do, and the two of them go flying right through Thragg's mothership, causing it to split in two, as down on the planet's surface we see Anissa punching Omni-Man and calling him a traitor, as Alan battles Krieg, and Mark, Oliver, Thaedus, and Tech Jacket lift up both halves of Thragg's ship to throw it out into space and keep it from crashing down onto the city, as we see Thragg speeding away with Argal's skull in his hands, saying he will defeat them yet, but this can't be how things end, and the Viltrumites actually retreat for now, causing all of the enslaved aliens to give up and leading into the next phase of this war. We see one of Thaedus' assistants screaming at the other about how he could betray his own people before firing a laser through his head, which the traitor amazingly survives. Eventually, Thaedus interjects, saying, "You caused all of this destruction and you will pay for your crimes, but first you'll tell us where the Viltrumites are going to next," as the alien replies that nothing matters anymore because it's too late for Thaedus and the others. They have no hope of winning this war because Thragg told him if they lost this battle somehow, he would order every Viltrumite in the universe to return to Planet Viltrum as they prepare for their final counterattack, spelling the end for this war because of their overwhelming power. As the days and weeks go by, we see robots and drones working to rebuild the city, and Thaedus fills the others in on what's been happening since the battle. First off, for the most part, the Viltrumite War is over, as Thaedus has received word from almost all the planets that Viltrum had conquered that their Viltrumite overlords have abandoned them, causing them to switch over to the Coalition since they see the chance for victory in the fact that the Coalition has Viltrumites of their own. From this moment on, Thaedus intends to prepare for what he calls Viltrum's last gasp, as everyone heads to Planet Viltrum and we near the final battle of this event. We see Omni-Man's Avengers finally all come together as we see Tech Jacket, Mark, Alan, Nolan, Battle Beast, Space Racer, and Oliver all ready for this final battle on Planet Viltrum. As the ship departs and makes its way there, we get a few great moments between characters, starting with Omni-Man and Mark as they first discuss Mark's upgraded suit using Telescrian materials before Nolan explains to Mark what he likes about the planet, telling him it's a beautiful place to live. Mark expresses fear to his father over the thought of having to fight dozens of Viltrumites at once since he barely survived against Conquest, but Nolan says, "Son, that's war." As Oliver bursts into the room asking where Space Racer is, and Omni-Man explains he'll be meeting them on Viltrum because he's picking something up for the battle. Eventually, as they're minutes away from reaching the planet, they stop and actually leave the ship to start heading there on their own through space, as Thaedus explains that the planet Viltrum is more of a tomb at this point for the billions of Viltrumites who died to the Scourge virus, so as a result of that, the Viltrumites have set up numerous defenses to protect their rings of their planet and its surface, making it impossible for a ship to approach them easily. Thaedus says that them returning here is really more symbolic than anything, as Mark sees the rings for himself for the first time, time, and it makes them uncomfortable seeing how many were lost. They start to pass through the planet's ring of Viltrumite's bodies as suddenly Thaedus is attacked from the side and they see a Viltrumite woman named Thula who uses a sharp attachment on her hair to fight, but she's quickly dealt with as Battle Beast cracks her across the face of his mace and sends her flying away so they can fight alone, giving everyone a chance to continue forward. That is until Thragg and an entire horde of Viltrumites fly from the planet to meet our heroes, telling them to prepare for their death, as Thaedus tells everyone to quickly move fast from opponent to opponent and never let them group on and overpower you. At that moment, Space Racer arrives and immediately shoots through a Viltrumite, killing him with the Infinity Ray and releasing a crew of Ragnars that he retrieved from their planet onto the enemies. As the Ragnars start to eat a few Viltrumites and even the odds, Thragg actually gets worried when he sees these things, telling his forces to avoid fighting them and let them die in space as they focus on what they're here for, and Tech Jacket smiles thinking about how his Beetle Toxin Laserbeams have actually been really effective against the Viltrumites, but at that moment he nearly gets his head ripped off by a Viltrumite that gets his head knocked off by Alan, as Alan begins to show why he might be the strongest here. Off on the side, Oliver and Mark get surrounded as they tell them both that they're inferior half-breeds and wouldn't even be allowed in the army, but Oliver punches one of them in the nuts, as even further off we see Thragg battling against Space Racer and knocking him off his bike, as Mark finally meets the current leader of the Viltrumites face to face, asking who he even is as he punches him right in the stomach as hard as he can. But Thragg backhands Mark saying please, as Oliver comes in making a joke about how much Thragg sucks throwing a punch his way, but Thragg catches Oliver by the arm, asking him if he's the type to always tell jokes, because Thragg has a joke of his own. In that moment, Thragg pulls back and punches Oliver so hard that Oliver's entire jaw breaks, his teeth go flying, and his arm rips right off. Thragg throws the arm to the side saying he seemed like such a nice boy, as Mark comes flying in a rage, screaming, "My brother! You killed my brother!" Mark starts to try as hard as he can to hurt him by punching him in the side and in the face as hard as he can, actually drawing a little blood out of Thragg's nose, as the king says, "You're way in over your head. Even Conquest fears me, boy." But this is where Mark shares the news that he killed Conquest already, which gets a reaction out of all the Viltrumites in the area, and Omni-Man sending a Nissa flying with a punch confirms this to everyone, as Thaedus tells his troops to do something they won't expect as they're distracted, as Mark gets nearly knocked out by Thragg and Thaedus grabs him along with Tech Jacket, flying straight towards Planet Viltrum as he tells Space Racer to fire right into the center of the planet. We see Mark, Omni-Man, Thaedus, and the others flying alongside one of Space Racer's Infinity Ray shots, but the closer they get to the planet, the more they start to get picked off, as eventually it's just the Viltrumite trio left, and Thaedus tells him to go faster, as Mark starts to fall behind and Omni-Man pulls him a little closer. The three of them fall towards the planet like a giant burning asteroid as the ray beam pierces the planet's core, and Mark, Thaedus, and Nolan all fly right through it, causing eruptions of energy and lava all over Planet Viltrum as they exit on the other side, and Planet Viltrum explodes. This explosion is massive, and as the Viltrumites are fighting, the energy continues to expand, sending the blast outwards as we see entire continents being blown out into space, and everything goes white as the rings of the planets destabilize and send billions of Viltrumite corpses into the battlefield. In the chaos, Mark is one of the first to wake up in the cold of space and instantly finds his brother Oliver holding him tight, as Thaedus wakes up telling Thragg and everyone else that this is over. He says, "Your planet is gone, you have nowhere to run, and the entire universe is against you. There's nothing left to do but to surrender." But as he says this, Thragg is so visibly upset that he's turned red, as tears swell up in his eyes and veins begin to bulge, saying, You began all of this when you betrayed Viltrum." He tells Thaedus that he's taken everything from them, including their history, but Thragg's empire won't stand for this. And as Thaedus and Thragg rush into each other for one final attack, Thaedus tells Thragg once again to surrender, as Thragg says there's no more room for surrender from now on. All that's left is revenge. As everyone looks on shocked and watches Thragg crush the head of their leader, and things are about to get even worse. We see the heroes, and right now Mark is busy mourning Oliver as Battle Beast still hasn't woken up, leaving Alan and Nolan as the only two awake and ready to battle. As Thragg tells everyone to grieve whatever they must, but make it quick because they're all next. As he begins to attack, he rushes past everyone and says, "I'm starting with you," and flies right into Mark, knocking him away from Oliver, but Mark responds back with a kick to the stomach and gets choked by the king, who says, "My history, my heritage, your heritage. We were going to restore Viltrum to its shining glory, but you've taken away its future. Nothing I've ever done to you compares to what you've done," as he puts Mark's head in between both of his fists and tries to squeeze it as hard as he can. But Omni-Man swoops in and saves his son, saying, "It's over, Thragg." This is when the leader gives attention to Nolan, telling him that Thaedus was the one that doomed their people and might have even been the one to help create the Scourge virus. But Nolan replies that he's not the man he once was, and as much as it pains him to admit it, he thinks their people only deserve extinction for all the crimes they've committed. So Thragg headbutts him in the nose, breaking it as he swats away Battle Beast and takes Mark and Nolan further out into space so their battle can continue. We see Alan getting picked apart by a bunch of Viltrumites before Battle Beast gets thrown into the fray, actually freeing Alan for a second and giving Space Racer and Tech Jacket time to regroup with him and start to get away. And further in space, we pick back up with Thragg staring down the father-son duo as they gush blood from their faces, and Mark asks how they're gonna beat this guy, but Nolan says they aren't. From birth, Thragg has been trained and tempered to be the strongest among them all, and he's trained in every form of combat the Empire has ever deemed useful. Thragg grabs them both by their throats as Nolan tells Mark to always remember that he loved him and that their time together made him stronger, not weaker. This confuses Mark, but Nolan
Nolan tries to sacrifice himself so that Mark can get away. However, Thragg sees this coming and goes after Mark anyway, smashing him in the face and telling him that he'll just be a bunch of entrails by the time that Omni-Man makes it back. The issue is Nolan rushes back as fast as he can, and Thragg actually lets go of Mark to shove his arm right through Nolan's stomach, leaving Nolan to think Mark and fall away into space while Thragg looks back over to Mark, grabs him by the head of both hands, and squeezing it until Mark passes out, as Thragg actually wins. After the end of the Viltrumite War, the Viltrumites return to Thragg, asking him why he hesitates to kill both Nolan and Mark, but he says for the sake of their empire, they need them. Commander Krieg doesn't like this decision as he tries to fly towards the father and son and put an end to them against Thragg's wishes, but when he's stopped, Thragg says, trust me, if we are to survive, them above all others must be spared for the moment. From here, the Viltrumites all board one of their last remaining ships, leaving Mark and Nolan in space to go cold. As they float in space near death, Omni-Man's body has a smile on his face, knowing he did what he could to save his son, as suddenly a man named Download in a spacesuit stumbles upon them and calls back to the captain of the ship once he's guiding them on board, as the crew heads to Telescria, marking the official end of the Viltrumite War. We've seen planets destroyed, more Viltrumites than we've ever seen in the story so far, and this arc really sets up the rest of the events of the story, leading into the ending and setting up some pretty crazy events. But for the moment, Mark is going to need to heal and won't wake up for a decent amount of time. However, once he does, he's met by Alan alone in a room, who tells him that he's glad he made it to the room in time because he was worried about Mark at the start and is glad to see him awake, as everything is about to change.
When Omni-Man finally returns to Earth after leaving it during season 1, we see Mark first checking on his mother since it's been 10 months since he's been home. However, when Mark has to leave, it's finally time for the awkward conversation between Nolan and Debbie, as Omni-Man starts off the conversation not with "I'm sorry," but instead by telling Debbie that he's disappointed that she took a new mate, while she cries, telling him that he's a hypocrite. For a second, Cecil walks through a light door and fires on Omni-Man, thinking he's an enemy, but after they shush him away, Debbie makes some coffee and sits down with Omni-Man, who tells Debbie that he wishes he could just show her how much he missed her, as she tells him that she left her ex-boyfriend Paul when she saw him last time because things just felt wrong, but that doesn't mean she's just gonna come back to him now that he's home. It's here where Nolan tells her she just needs to understand, and Debbie screams that she doesn't need to understand anything because he ruined her life, and she just wants things to go back to how they were before, which makes Omni-Man say that things will never go back to how they were before because he'll never lie to Debbie again. And despite the fact that Debbie wasn't entirely buying it at first, as time goes on, she even agrees to allow him to live in their home again. However, Omni-Man quickly realizes that he isn't exactly welcome on Earth, so him and Debbie make a decision. One day, Mark comes home with Adam Eve by his side, and Debbie tells Mark that Nolan isn't able to stay any longer, but they have gotten back together. So in an effort to work things out, she's going to be going with him out into space, exploring different alien worlds and getting to know each other better than they ever have. But also because Debbie wants a chance to see Oliver, who has a new role in the story as well. This shocks Mark because his mother has always been someone he can go to, and now she'll be leaving Earth behind, as she and Nolan truly become each other's soulmates and leave Mark and Adam Eve in charge of the house from now on. But this won't be the last we see of them in the series.